Morning, Dr. Sproul. My name's Glenn. I'm from Auburn, Washington. It's been a 12-year journey for me into the Reformed faith, and much has been through the teaching of Ligonier, and this is a big deal to me. But in that journey and from my former life, the objections I get is always around the concept of free will. And can you confirm why the sovereign act of election in God is not fatalistic determinism?
I think I can do that very clearly. We don't believe that God's sovereign government of the universe is reduced to the rule and government of mythical fates. That's what fatalism means, okay? Now, nor is it determinism in the sense of mechanistic determinism, which says that people are reduced to the role of inhuman robots and God simply pulls their strings and so on. Now, on the other hand, if you ask me the question, does God's sovereignty determine the ultimate outcome of any event? I'd say, of course. What else could determine that? Now, you ask about the issue of free will. In the third chapter of the Westminster Confession of Faith, it says that God has, from all eternity, immutably determined whatsoever comes to pass, semicolon, but not in such a way that denies secondary causes or does violation to the will of the creature. So that Reformed theology historically has always argued that human beings, even in their fallen state, still have what was called a free will, a liberum arbitrium, what Augustine defined in that sense, in the sense that every human being has the ability to choose what he wants to do. Now, the key is want to. We don't always want to obey God. And we still have the freedom not to obey God. In fact, that's the freedom that we exercise all the time to our everlasting peril. But if you mean, do we still have a will that is not bent or inclined to one direction or the other, then obviously the Bible would repudiate that, because the Bible says that we are in bondage to sin. We're held captive by our evil inclinations. The heart is deceitfully wicked among all things. Now, the big issue, I believe, with free will is not so much a philosophical issue as it is an issue, particularly in this country. Virtually every person born in this country has been reared in an educational system that teaches a view of the will that is humanistic and basically pagan. They don't know it because they've been taught that the will has been unaffected by the fall, that man has the equal ability to choose the good and the bad, even in his fallen condition. That, as I said, is a secularistic, humanistic, pagan view of the will, and fails to recognize what the Bible clearly teaches, the doctrine of original sin. Now, this is a very short answer. I've written a whole book on this called Willing to Believe, and I've traced the history of the debate all the way back from Augustine, that his debates with Pelagius, and then dealing with Luther, and his debates in the 16th century, Calvin with Piggius, and Edwards with Chubb, and so on, going through church history, where we see that man is free insofar as he has the power to do what he wants to do, and God is free. The difference is God is more free than I am. I've heard it said many times that God's sovereignty ends with man's freedom. If that's the truth, then man is sovereign and God isn't. I'd say I have freedom, it's real freedom, but it ends where God's freedom begins.